All right, welcome back to Make It Share It, the podcast where creativity meets courage. And I'm joined by as always, by Lauren Chandler and Stephen Cooper.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
It's been a while since we recorded, so excited to be back with you guys. And our guest today is my friend Kyle Porter.
Appreciate you guys having me. It's we haven't talked in a while, Kent, so it's always, I think it's always fun to, when you're friends with somebody, to jump into this format, because you can ask, there's a freedom to ask questions that would maybe take a while to ask if you were meeting in person, which is a really, I think, kind of an unintended benefit of podcasting.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I love that. That's a great Kyle insight too. I think it's still how Kyle thinks. I love that. So Kyle, as always, we'll talk about it as we go in the story. But I mean, I did this before with Jamie Winship. When I think about resume and eulogy virtues, right? Starting with eulogy more, Kyle and I got to meet as we were both on a transition board for Mosaic Church in Richardson, and got to know each other more through that experience, and just saw a loving father and husband, and somebody who is a deep thinker, and a great storyteller, a very curious person, and creative. Just, I don't know, I think about somebody who is bringing a lot of fun into people's life, but also a lot of depth into people's lives. And so we'll talk more about how he's doing that specifically. Resume wise, he's a writer. He's started a website called, I think it's Pistols Firing, right? The Oklahoma State site, and built that up and sold that. And then was the lead golf writer for CBS for many years, and well-respected voice on the tour with many of the players, and incredible writer. So many great articles out there that Kyle has written about the sport. And then recently left CBS to start Normal Sport, which I think he describes, and I love. It's like, it's about golf, like a newsletter about golf, but really a way to also talk about life. Just using golf as a metaphor. It's super fun. It takes all kinds of twists and turns into the golf world, but also into life. So we'll talk about all that and why he started it a little bit more. But as usual, we're going to jump in with something fun, which are Kent's fun questions. And I told everybody before we started, I'm giddy about these. So my first one is, will Tiger Woods win another major?
Great.
No. It would be awesome if he did, but he is, the thing that I like to say about Tiger is I think he's turns 50 this year. He was 1970. Yeah, I think he was 1975. So I think he turns 50 in December, but he's really like a 75-year-old. He has a 75-year-old body. He's turning 50 by his birth certificate, just because of the wear and tear over the years. So I'm sorry to break it to you, Kent, that 2019 Masters was the last
That was his
major
Jack Nicklaus
championship that Tiger would win. Yeah.
Can I throw a hot sports opinion in this as well?
Yeah.
HSOs. Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Just from yesterday, when he did when he accidentally grabbed his wedge because he misheard the thing, the way that he was able to laugh at himself and have a good time about that is the other reason why he can't win anymore. When he was winning, I don't think there was much fun Tiger. He was stare you down, crazy Tiger. And I think with his kid and everything else, he's chilled out. Good for him. He's not a psychopath on the course anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that stops him.
There's a great, I think it gets attributed to Winston Churchill. I don't know if it's a Winston Churchill quote, but it's a quote about, can you be a great achiever and also a great father? And it's, like, what it gets at is like, can you accomplish great things and still have these other parts it's not necessarily about being a dad, but these other parts of your life where you're also present and, caring for other people. And I think one of the great juxtapositions of our time, especially in the like very sports centric culture that we live in, is the people that get revered and idolized are kind of like singular and sometimes a little bit sociopathic. And it's like, I don't like the people that my kids are like, Elon Musk has done all these things. I'm like, I don't think that's very aspirational, as a believer, as a just somebody who's trying to care about the world. And you probably didn't want to get that deep that early, Stephen, but that is what a little bit what Tiger's life makes me think of. And so this transition into like post like super psychotic Tiger I think it's been pleasant for everybody. And I think honestly, I wrote this last week, it's allowed him to mature in ways that he was never allowed to grow up. Right. When he was 17 years old, people just started telling him yes to everything. Sure, we can do that. Yeah. And when you don't hear no, you don't get a chance to mature. And I think that it's allowed him to at a weird, it's weird to think about like a 50-year-old like growing up, but I think that's kind of where he's at in his life. And it's been, I think, kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I thought yesterday that was hilarious. Like, that's great Tiger Woods front page news, to be laughing at himself,
Yeah.
a mistake, and his team was like crying laughing. And I was like,
It was great.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
what we need.
Okay, my other fun question is just, if you could only cover one golfer in a major, like where you're just like, you get one person, you're going to cover them for like, it can be like the final round, they're in contention. Who is the golfer? What major is it? And why?
So I have to pick like the major. And does it have to be this year?
No. It can be.
Does it have to be in the future? Or could it have been something that happened in the past?
In the past.
It's Lee Trevino.
No, it could be in the past. Yeah.
In the past, I would probably pick. That's a great question. I've never thought about that, Ken. Probably. So I think Phil Mickelson is super. He's weird, but he's very compelling as a character, and I think that him winning the Open Championship, British Open 13, a tournament that he never thought he'd win, and there was like a ton of people in the mix. Tiger was in the mix. Hunter Mayhew, just a bunch of different like huge names at the time. And Phil won it. He shot a final round 66 at Muirfield. That was like, I think that was my first year to cover professional golf. And I wasn't there. At the time, I didn't go to overseas tournaments. And I still don't do it that much, but that would have been an amazing one. But I think one of the weird parts about covering sports, and maybe this is specific to golf, but sometimes it's not the wins that you want to cover, it's the losses. So it's Jordan Spieth in 2016 when he hits it in the water at number 12 at the Masters. That was like the most, I don't know about easiest, but it was the most interesting thing to write because there's so many different human emotions and there's just so much humanity in a loss. Whereas a win, it's like, oh, the guy was great and he made a bunch of birdies. And it's kind of like, I don't know, did you watch it? Like you kind of saw the whole thing. But with losses, it's like Rory losing the Open in 2022 at St. Andrews. Like there's this scene where he's on a golf cart with his wife and they're about to pull away. And I'll never forget this. He just buries his head in her shoulder and he's just like crying because he knows like he blew his like really one great opportunity to win a British Open at St. Andrews, which everybody that's great has done. Or not everybody, but a lot of people that are great have done it. And those losses are like I kind of love, right? I mean, it sucks for the person, but it's kind of really fun to write because you get to draw on so many different pieces of their humanity.
Yeah.
It's more relatable, I think, to
Totally.
everybody's common experience versus being the champion. I mean, that's a small demographic, you know?
Yeah, especially in golf because you have 156 people playing every week
Mm-hmm.
and 155 of them are lose, you know? And so like, yeah, I can identify with that for sure.
Oh, that's good. All right. So going down a little bit into the depth world, although I guess it could be a really funny turning point. I don't know. But so a turning point, as we always say, it's something that just changed the way you think, live, or relate in the world. And as I was saying to you over text, you know, you can take that wherever you want in terms of age or, you know, what area of life that is. But is there one that stands out for you when you look back on life and think about where you are today?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple of different ones. I think from a spiritual perspective, the most impactful one was probably it was definitely our daughter died in 2015. So we had a stillborn daughter, and that was just a moment, or not a moment. It was a window of time that whether it's for good or bad, it's going to change you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for my wife and I, it was very much there was after that happened, there was just a seriousness about the gospel and about like, hey, do we believe this or not? You know, and with moments like that, you're like, either you're in or you're out. And thankfully we were in. We were like, yes, we believe this more than ever. And so that just changed. Like whenever something like that happens, it changes everything else, because everything else is affected by whether you are seriously in on believing in Jesus or not. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it sounds weird that it's like the best and worst thing that's ever happened. But I think if you've gone through something that big, and maybe this is your experience, Lauren, with Matt and everything that he went through, it is kind of the worst and best thing that's ever happened, because it completely changes the way that you live the rest of your life. And so from then on, it's not that I wasn't serious about Jesus or about like the way I was living my life before that, but there was definitely, I think Keller calls it planting a flag in the rebel soul. And I can't remember the rest of that quote. It's an amazing quote. If you're listening, you should Google it. I should know it. But it's planting a flag in a rebel soul of like, hey, this is like who God is, and this is who I am in light of that. And you're different from then on, I think.
Yeah.
I'll go find it and put it in the show notes for sure. So it's just easy for people that are listening to find that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great quote.
Yeah, it is.
So good.
Yeah. And you wrote about that actually for The Village. I remember that's probably the first time of hearing your name. So I remember David Roark was working with you, obviously, and other writers to create some content for the church, and wrote a beautiful post about that I imagine is still on the TVC website. I can find that too and put a link to it.
Yeah, I had written, I kind of knew from the moment like that week happened, I was like, I have to write something about this, because I wanted to point to the Lord's sufficiency in all of it. And ended up writing something, and it got picked up by actually the Gospel Coalition. And then later on kind of repurposed it for the Joy and the Sorrow.
Oh, that's
book.
right.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, so it was with Matt, and
Yep.
there was like, I think 10 of us total.
Yeah.
So that was the Village connection there. But it's something that, the other thing that it created was this, whenever you're somewhat of a public figure, whether it's just like on Instagram or Twitter, or in my case, like writing for a national website, there's always this weird, like, okay, how much of my faith life do I share? Or not how much, but like, when do I share it? What are the opportunities to share it? And so that was a moment where I was like, this is who I am. And so it almost made it easier from then on to be like, you guys know what I'm all about. So nothing that I do or say now that's related to the Lord should really surprise you that much. So that was a grace of the Lord to provide that kind of early on in my career, so that I never had to like have these weird interactions with people in a public forum about like, are you a Christian? Are you not? Like, there's always kind of it's like an underground, like, are you in this or not? And I was like, this is who I am. So that was a grace of the Lord for sure.
Well, thanks for sharing that one. I know it's figured that might be in contention for sure. So, yeah. Okay. So then switching to the making part, let's talk about, you're at CBS. Got a great job. Things are what some might call comfortable, you know what to expect, and you know your role and all of those things. And so there's this idea that births in normal sport. So let's just start there of like, what was the idea? What began to what was that process like early on, and thinking about making this new newsletter?
Yeah, so it actually goes back to so in 2020, I sold my Oklahoma State website, which was tantamount to like a texags.com. It never got what's the Baylor one?
Sikkim 365 is the big one.
So it was kind of in that vein. It never got as big as those probably, but I sold it I had one full-time employee. He bought it. And so I've just always had like a side project going on, and I'm sure it frustrates my wife. And and so it was in 2020, I guess, at the end of 2020, everything was obviously very weird in the sports world that year, but they had the US Open in September and the Masters in November, which was so weird. It was like the Masters and then Thanksgiving the next week. And I remember I had started to pick up this idea that golf is just really like a strange endeavor, right? I think people think about it like this kind of stuffy country club sport, and it can be, but you've also got guys on the PGA Tour like stripping down to their underwear and getting in a lake and hitting a ball out of the mud. And you're like, that is like, it gets normalized for people that have been in golf for a long time, but you're like, that's really weird. Like, that doesn't happen in basketball or
No.
baseball or whatever. And so I started picking up on these little like things, and I would just reference them as like, oh yeah, normal sport, like very tongue in cheek. And people like it was kind of became a thing or whatever. And then after the 2021 Ryder Cup I went to this guy that's our illustrator now, Jason Page, and I said, hey, let's like compile all this into a book for the year. And he was like, okay, yeah, let's do it. And so we did that. We wrote a book. We did 2 more books after that. And then at some point along the way, I kind of saw these 2 paths. And one of them was stay at CBS for 30 years or for whatever the time was, and maybe get into TV a little bit or whatever. And this other path was, hey, take this creative endeavor that you enjoy. And I had already done it with my Oklahoma State website, kind of. That was never my full-time deal. It was always a side deal, but I kind of knew the ins and outs of it a little bit. And so the other path was take this endeavor that you enjoy and explore it. Go see what can happen. Go see if you can turn it into a business. And so I kind of told CBS about that actually in the fall of 2023, and just said, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking. I don't want to hide it from you guys. I want to be upfront about it. And they were great about it. They were always great about everything as it related to my career. And so my contract was up in October of 2024. And that's when I launched Normal Sport full time. I had been doing the newsletter on the side. The books basically turned into the newsletter because I didn't do the book last year. And we had an audience. We had built it up to about 10,000. It's about 15,000 now on the newsletter. And yeah, I mean, for the last 5 months, it's just been like, okay, let's see if we can get to the next week. Let's get to the next week. Somebody asked me the other day, what does success look like this year? I said, if like December 31st, I'm still doing that's success this year. So yeah, that's kind of the story of how Normal Sports started and what it is right now.
Yeah. It's great.
Great.
I mean, at some point on this conversation, Kyle, I feel like I have to tell you my Kent Rabelais golfing story.
I would
Do
love to
tell.
hear it.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Because I don't play golf. I don't know if you get that by looking at me. However, Kent and I go to Baylor together, and in a film project class, I had to film with like 8mm or 16mm film, like the old, you put it up to your eye and it's taking one little spool of film, and we had to cut it and splice it with a razor blade. It was just like the old school way of doing film. And so I was like, and you had to just film like a really simple, I mean, I think you had like 20 seconds on a roll or something like that.
Wait, you had to like physically cut the film?
Yeah. You with a little razor blade thing and then glue them together and stuff. It's crazy. That's how those things.
That's wild.
It's wild. Luckily, digital came out while we were in film school, and it saved our bacon a little bit. She's like, hey, just point, shoot, delete. It doesn't matter anymore. So I thought of something about hitting a golf ball, like on a putting green, following the golf ball, and then the shot of it going into the hole. Like I was like, oh, that could be artistic, but also 20 seconds or less. What other action is there that has multiple steps and multiple edits? But then I was like, no one's going to let me on a golf course. So Kent worked at the golf store. Okay. So I was like, oh, perfect. They had a putting green in there. I'll go into the golf store. Kent's working. I'll let me film. Now, what I didn't know when I walked in, Kent is a dadgum celebrity in this golf store. People are shaking his hand in Waco over the counter. I just want to shake your hand. And I'm over there filming. I'm just like, what is happening over there? Well, Kent had hit a hole-in-one at some deal like 2 days prior, and it got in the Waco paper. And every guy over 60 in the Waco area just wanted to touch the hem of his garment and just be in his presence because he hit a hole-in-one. And I'm just over there trying to film. And I'm like, I did not know Kent was this big a deal.
Definitely an every guy over 60 thing that they just eat up for sure.
Yes.
I got my first taste of it. Yes. They wanted to read their morning paper, get the free coffee at Whataburger, and go talk to Kent about his hole-in-one.
That adds up. I believe it.
It was pretty good. I got an A on that project, though. It killed.
There you go.
That's awesome.
Thanks to
Okay,
Kent.
so I want to know, what was that, Kent? What kind of, was it a contest?
It was a tournament. We were just playing a tournament.
Okay.
And it was, I hit a hole-in-one in that tournament, which is pretty rare that you would do that. It's the only one I've ever hit.
I mean, I've done that putt, but.
Yeah.
What course was it at in Waco?
So what is the name of that course? Do you know some of it? It's not Riverside.
I
It's
think I've only played like Lake Waco, maybe.
it wasn't Lake Waco. I'll have to go back and think. This is how old we are. I'm like, that was like it's like whatever 20 something years ago.
We old. Yes.
But I yeah, it was just like a scramble tournament and hit the right shot at the right time.
Way
What
to
can I
go.
It's
say?
wild.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to know. Oh, can I
Go.
ask a question?
Please do.
Okay, because I probably know the least. I don't know. I'm assuming, Kyle, you enjoy playing golf, and I would love to know when that started for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do like playing. We have 4 kids that are 11, 2 11-year-olds, 8 and 5, and so I don't play a ton when I'm at home. I actually whenever I travel, I'll play with friends that, like, last year at the US Open, we're there for 6 days, and so you get time to you just have downtime, so you go play at some different courses around there. So that's really fun. Golf for me was, I actually just did an interview on my newsletter with my mom. I interviewed my mom,
Aw.
and she was an elite golfer growing up, played until she was mid 20s, late 20s. And so golf was kind of always around our family. I didn't play. I played baseball in high school and into college a little bit. So that was my thing. But golf, through her dad and her and my dad a little bit, like, it was kind of always in and around our family. And I did play some in high school, but never competitively. But I like to attribute that to her, to her
Yeah.
having it, like, in her life, and then kind of passing it down a little bit. Her and my grandfather, he was really into it. He never was as good as she was, but yeah, those are kind of the two people that passed it down to me. And I've honestly, like, as an adult, I've kind of fallen in love with it a little bit, just because it's a very communal thing. And one of the things we did at Mosaic at our church is we started a men's golf league, and it's been one of the best ways for our guys to just get around each other and have conversation, have community, have fellowship, go play 9 holes. And we try to tell people, don't get in a cart. You got to walk, you got to, get a push cart or carry your bag and just talk. So that's been a really fun thing as I've gotten older, just to get to be around that a little bit.
Yeah, Matt and I have talked about what do we want to do as our youngest is 15. She only has a couple more years. And golf has come up because that's
Oh,
something we
let's
could
go.
do together. But I went with a friend to play at Bridalwood the other day. I'm gonna need some work.
Well, the great thing is it can still be primarily a communal thing.
Yes,
Even if you're
absolutely.
bad, you can still you can still have a great day because you're out. It's the thing I tell people. It's like a 6-mile hike. If you play 18 holes,
Yes.
it's like a 6-mile hike, and you happen to swing a metal stick a couple of times.
My 2 pieces. Oh, sorry. I was in oil and gas, still am, for like 20 years, which we joke it's oil and gas and golf, because that's
Yeah.
how all deals get made. That's how you talk as
For
a
sure.
company. That if you don't play golf, it's going to be a problem. Like, they want to know, like, oh, did you have back surgery? And you're like, no. Like, oh, did you have knee
That's the only
replacement?
reason.
And you're
Yeah.
like, yes, I had a knee replacement. Yeah. So,
2 of
Lauren, what I tell people that helps me is, like, best professionals on the planet, the 1%ers that make millions of dollars doing this, on the same course over a 4-day period, can swing from like 10 strokes
Yeah.
without flinching, if not more.
More.
So
yeah,
the
for sure.
amateur, you're going to go through ups and downs, even if you're good. And then the
Mhm.
second, I became golf cart DJ, which I failed at horribly the first time I did it, because if you're playing golf, and we were playing it, is it Kirsten Creek? The one else, OSU.
Yeah.
Again, it's oil guys. They're all from Oklahoma. So we were played up there, and I'm doing the speaker in the car that they all bring. And I knew I couldn't play my music. No one wants to play golf to Rage Against the Machine or to Counting Crows. Both aren't good. So I was like, but I knew. And they didn't want any of it. They wanted new country sing-along, good old boy. And it took me a real long time. I don't know half those artists too. I was struggling. So, and then I'm the comic relief. You can just be comic relief. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
Totally.
When you do get a good shot, I talk trash the whole time walking up to it. Like, I thought we were supposed to get closest to the hole because it looks like what I did, but not what you did. Just do a lot of those jokes because
Mhm.
they know, Coop, that's the only shot out of 18
Yep.
holes. that even went
Was worth
remotely where it was
something.
supposed to go.
Yep.
So it's like, just don't be the mean guy on the course. Don't be the guy who's angry on the course, and
Yeah.
you'll just have a
And don't be slow. That's the biggest thing.
don't
Play
be
fast,
slow.
play fast and talk, and it's a great
Yeah.
couple hours.
Yeah,
Right.
I always love the weekend warrior up there, like throwing the grass clippings in the air, then
Grinding,
lining up and
yeah.
then throwing them up one more time, going
Yeah.
back to the, just like,
Like,
oh,
are you
gosh.
trying
Just
to
swing.
qualify for the U.S. Open, or what are we doing here?
I want to do Caddyshack 2 and just have all the clubs that do everything for me, and he just pushes a button and it like
Yeah.
just shoots it to the hole. That's what I need.
I think Mark Rober did a video on that, so you can get, there's like,
Okay,
he made a
nice.
driver that like, it's like a rocket boosted driver, so you can send
Sign
him an
me
email
up.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So great.
Okay, I want to get into the creative side of things. So writing, what's it, is it for you, is writing one of those things where like you just sit down and it's just a joy and the words just flow effortlessly? Is it like it's excruciating and there's blocks and you're just trying to like go, golly, like is it somewhere in between? Like what's the writing process like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's mostly the first one. Like, I just enjoy it. And I think one of the things that I'm very grateful for is to be in a business where I care how much revenue my business makes, but as long as it hits the baseline, like I feel very content, and like I enjoy the work. I heard this quote the other day that was like, the reward for good work is more of the same work a lot of times. And like, I'm glad for that. Like, I just enjoy sitting down for 2 or 3 hours and it sounds weird to say I enjoyed sitting down for this amount of time and writing about golf, but I'm really writing just whatever I'm feeling about life and kind of using golf as a conduit for that. Now, sometimes you get into like the details of what's going on between the PGA Tour and Saudi Arabia and all these different just absurd things that I never envisioned ever having to write about. But especially at major championships and these big events, it's just like, Wright Thompson said, you stick a needle into your vein and you just start bleeding. And a lot of times that's what it feels like, which is for me a ton of fun. There are times where it's like, I'd rather mess around on Twitter or go have lunch with my wife, or I'm just like a squirrel, like all over the place. But for the most part, I have a ton of gratitude for having a profession where I just sit down and for the most part enjoy what I'm doing.
Is there parts of it like the humor, and then when you're doing more of the depth, like are you drawn to one or the other more, or is that they just both kind of naturally are part of who you are, so it just comes out that way?
I don't know if my wife would say that I'm funny and deep. The other day she said, actually last night at dinner, our 8-year-old asked why. We said, you can ask us anything. I don't know if I should share this story, but I'm going to. He said, as we said, you can ask us anything. He said, why do you guys kiss all the time? And she said, well, it's because we love each other. And he said, why do you love each other? And she said, well, these 8 reasons are the reasons that I love your dad. And also he's sometimes funny. And I was like, that's sometimes? Like, that's brutal.
That's brutal.
So I think I aspire to both of those. I think one thing that's very effective is, so the Inside the NBA show with Barkley and Shaq and all those guys, their greatest skill is that they're funny like 85-90% of the time. And then they'll hit you with something that's like deeper. And you're like, it's almost because it's different, it affects you more. And so I think if you try to go deep 85-90% of the time, people are just like, it's too much. Like, I'm out. So I think having that, the balance of like 80 to 90% funny and lighthearted, and then 10% I'll take you below the line, is, I think I've found that to be pretty effective.
Definitely. So has my husband in preaching.
For sure. Maybe that's where I picked it up.
I don't know, but I think about that a lot. And it's interesting because I think a lot of times I don't know, for him, he would look at other people and be like, they're a little bit more serious. And it's interesting. I think he's had more impact with people because I feel like he's had more impact when he is who he is and he's not trying to be anyone else. And so
Totally.
It's a gift, to be able to deliver a message that way.
It's a gift. Yeah. And it's also a gift, I think, to be in a job where you're not playing a role, or you're not having to get into a role for that occupation. You're just kind of being who you are. Like that is, I think, historically a pretty rare thing in terms of like the availability of occupations. Either you would do something that you didn't really love, or you felt like you weren't necessarily equipped for, or whatever. And so I definitely have a lot of gratitude for the kind of modern ability to be in a position where you're like, yeah, I enjoy this. I am hopefully getting better at it. And I'm just get to be myself, because it makes, I think it can be life-giving a lot of times instead of energy draining. And so when you go be with the family or whatever, yeah, you're tired, but you're not like, you don't feel like it's soul sucking, which is great.
No, I think my favorite teachers growing up, I learned more if they had any kind of humor or entertaining or something. It's like, whether it's preachers, teachers, any of that stuff, if you have 45 minutes to talk and you're trying to go deep for 42 of it,
That's tough.
it's tough. You're going to tune out. It's too much. Lets you know, like you said, if it's like 5%, it lets you know the important part that they want you to take away. And so, I mean, I know we got called to the village church, even though it was like 50 miles away from where we lived in 2005. And I had an excuse to leave any church. I would usually say the music's horrible. I can't be here. This is awful. Do you see what that guy's out of tune? He's singing sharp. His capo's on wrong, for goodness sakes. I got to go fix his capo. I can't be here. And Matt winning over with humor. And I think he dropped a Beck or a Beastie Boy reference in the first time I was visiting. And I was like, all right, I'll give this guy a shot. It was very helpful.
Did he do any Rage Against the Machine or just Beastie Boys?
No, but we did do Beck. He's done Beastie Boys. I'm trying to think of other good ones.
Yeah, Beastie Boys is more his thing.
Yeah. He did 2 turntables and a microphone from Beck a few times. Yeah.
That's true.
And again, I was just like, I'm listening now. So it's good.
For sure.
But yeah, I love it. And the Barkley guys, like, I'll tune in to hear what they say on certain things. Besides the fact that there's like 100 years of MBA sitting at that desk, I want to hear their banter on things. Then I want to hear them individually give their experience, like you said, like the 5%. And then they just start riffing. And I'm like, the combination of the three, it's going to really hurt when that show is gone, because I don't think you can replicate it. I think other networks have probably been trying for the last 10 years, putting their guys together, hoping that chemistry will come out. And it's just not been replicated yet.
I think one thing that's interesting about that is, and it doesn't always go well, but when you haven't been classically trained in a profession, it can sometimes work to your advantage. Like, I never went to journalism school. I wrote for my college paper and kind of got fired. And so I came into the industry, like, not really knowing anything. I didn't know what on the record and off the record was. I didn't know any of it. And so when that happens, I think it can work to your advantage, because you just do things your own way and you don't fit into anybody else's box. And sometimes that can go badly and it just doesn't end well for you. But I think as long as you're kind of adapting what needs to be adapted along the way and remaining like your unique self, it can go well also. My newsletter title yesterday was about Polyjuice Potion, because we're reading we're on the 7th Harry Potter right now. You're like, a golf newsletter about Polyjuice Potion, but that's just like, that was what came out of my mind. And so stuff like that, you would never, if you work for the Associated Press or ESPN, or when I was at CBS, you would never reference something like that. But it's what people, I think, are intrigued by and drawn to, and it's fun. And I don't know, sometimes sports coverage is just way too serious a lot of times. It's like, guys, this is not that serious. I know there's a lot of money involved. It's a game. But yeah, it's really not like the end of the world.
I've made an entire career, 1 in oil with a degree in filmmaking, and then 2 in music, having never taken a music class or a theory class in my entire life. So I still get talked over my head. Last month working with professionals in LA, and I sit there for a couple times and I'm like, hey guys, I don't know what you're saying, but if you want me to play something here, I can noodle around and try to find something cool. But like, I tell when I've taught songwriting classes, I just tell kids, I'm like, there's no amount of learning you have to go get before you write songs. Like, we just write songs. And a lot of times you'll write better songs because you don't have to play by all these rules and dance within all these lines that you've been taught your whole life in school. that this is what you do. And my biggest compliment is, I've heard this multiple times. He plays things that you shouldn't play, but they work. I've heard that multiple times. And then the other one is, you can tell he's never had a lesson. And I go, you're darn right. I haven't taken a lesson.
And he
but
can
it
cut
works.
film.
And I can
And he
cut
can
film
cut
with a
film.
razor blade. Yeah. So I tell people all the time, man, fish out of water or not necessarily going through the school system.
Yeah.
Can really, if you have the desire and the initiative, you can blow past some people and you'll be very new and like avant-garde because they're just not used to how you're coming about doing it.
I learned that with Ferris Bueller. He never had one lesson.
Never had one lesson.
You hear him play it amazingly.
Clarinet.
We just had that on for
Wow.
Drew, our oldest. He was sick the other day, and we put on Ferris Bueller, and
Perfect.
I like couldn't stop watching it. John Hughes is amazing.
I wonder what
Greatness.
the most watched movie ever is. Like not in terms of like box office or anything like that, but just which movie has been seen for the most amount of hours by the most amount of eyeballs of all time. That's got to be up there, right?
It would be up there. It's probably a Christmas movie, is my guess.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Would probably win
True.
out. Like It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
Home Alone,
Christmas Vacation.
Christmas Vacation. It's just all those that people play as part of a tradition that's set
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
Like I have
that's
a good little hunting tradition,
Yeah.
but it's not, the rest of the world doesn't necessarily cooped.
Yeah.
That's just us, Kent. That's
just
just
us.
you and I.
Do y'all
But-
remember when they played It's a Wonderful Life back to back to back to back?
Yeah.
Do you
Oh,
remember
yes.
that?
Yeah.
It was the first year that they released it where you could do that. I
Yes.
remember.
I think I don't remember. Yeah, there was some reason. Maybe it was anniversary, but it was, I do remember that on NBC.
Yes. And I was like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
We got it. We got it.
We got it. The Angels
That
got
was
its
before
wings.
DVR, I think, you know,
Yes.
so
You get all
Okay.
these chances.
yeah.
All right, Kyle, I do want to ask you about sharing this. So, the show is Make It, Share It. There's the sharing part where, okay, you're creating this thing, but how do people know it exists? And especially when it's a business, I mean, it really is. It's a different deal. You're like, this is how I want to make money and take care of my family and all those things. So I'm especially interested to hear what it was like for you to be like, all right, how do I get the word out? What does that look like? And build this.
Yeah, I think there was this initial push of like, whenever somebody leaves a prominent media outlet, whether it's ESPN or CBS or Yahoo, whatever, it's kind of a thing on social for a couple days. And so we definitely had that. And I had built up a decent list of just contacts and people in golf that I reached out to ahead of time, just said, hey, here's what's happening. Just wanted to let you know about it. And so there was some like, I just wanted to tell people that way because I think that they appreciated like not hearing it on Twitter or, whatever. And so that was kind of the initial sharing. Since then, honestly, like the thing that keeps me up at night, not literally, but metaphorically, is how do I even need to go from 15,000 subscribers to 30,000 to 50,000? Well, like what is my baseline for, okay, this thing can pretty much exist. Our two sources of revenue are sponsorships from different golf companies or kind of non-golf companies also, just people that are looking for the golf audience, and membership. During major championships weeks, like a lot of our content will be behind the paywall. And so people have kind of responded to that. So both of those have gone pretty well so far, but not well enough that it's like, okay, we've reached our baseline. We could do this forever. And so the thing that keeps me up is how do you grow it, and how do you get the audience big enough to where you do reach that baseline if we can do this forever? And it's been, I think, harder than I thought it would be. People respond to different little things like giveaways and contests and stuff like that. But I always feel like with stuff like that, I'm like, I'm not trying to like trick you into something. Like I want you to legitimately enjoy this thing that I'm making. So then I've thought more about, okay, well, are we actually a media company, or is media just the top of our funnel into something else? Are we a product company eventually? One of the products I want to make is a illustrated kids book about golf. Like the 60-year-olds that were yelling at Steven would buy that for their grandkids, right? And so there's just so many different ideas that I've had, and I found that one of the hard parts about entrepreneurship is staying disciplined with you go a million different ways and you're like, okay, this is what I do. I need to figure it out for now, and maybe we'll take care of some of that other stuff later on. It's been harder than I envisioned it would be to stay disciplined.
Finding your audience is weird. It's so weird right now in music and movies, and distribution's a big deal. It's like, how do I get the most eyes on it? Just period, with the intent of I'm trying to find my audience. So it's like you said, I don't want audience for audience sake. I'm trying to find my golfers. I'm trying to find my guys that would buy this and subscribe and be thrilled with it. Like, this is serving something that, oh, I've been wanting something like this forever, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
But to get those guys, you got to go wide. In the music world and in film, it's like film, you're just trying to get on Hulu. And you know that not everyone on Hulu is going to click on it, but you're like, or Netflix, but that's the way to get to your audience. And so I don't know what that is for writing and like a subscription-based thing. I know I don't know.
I think a lot of it just takes time, right? It's the thing that, you have a lot of people in media right now that I think the days of aggregating a bunch of stars and like having a huge payroll and like all this stuff, everything's so fractured that it doesn't work. Like you're never going to make enough money in a short enough amount of time to make that work. And so for me, it's like, okay, my wife says this all the time. She's like, what you're doing is work. Like, it's fine. Like, it's doing fine. And I'm always like, yeah, but what about 7 months? What about 3 years from now? All this stuff. She's like, you need to chill out, which is true. And so I think a lot of it is, it just takes a ton of time. One of the most interesting things I've heard over the last 6 months is, as it relates to audience size, is it's like, hey, you don't need 1 million people. You need the right however many people. And the example that I heard was, if you have a newsletter and there's only 32 people on it, but all 32 are owners of NFL teams, that's a really valuable newsletter, right? And that struck me as like, okay, that makes a ton of sense, And so I've started to think about the company more in those terms, maybe than like, okay, how do I get, a couple 100,000 people onto this newsletter?
I'm sure they appreciate, I think there's something about building trust with your audience too. And I think if you try too many different things, then they're like, well, what am I getting here? What is this exactly? So I think that's helpful to stay on course so that you're building that trust with the audience,
Yeah, that's our number one company value, is like, if our readers don't trust us from a what we're promoting perspective, or with what we're writing or anything like that, then we don't really have anything. You just have email addresses, and that is fine if you're looking for numbers, but not if you're looking for a business. So I think that's totally true.
Are there some specific products or next steps that you're like super pumped about, or, just dreaming about, that you want to talk about? Obviously you may not want to talk about things that are just preliminary, but.
Yeah, no, I think the two main things are, we've started to build out like merchandise, and it's that's hard. People are like, oh, just make merch. Like, one of my buddies that lives in Waco actually is like, just when are you going to get some? And it's like, well, first of all, you have to have a bunch of money to like build inventory, and then you have to have a shipping process. My kids don't want to do it. They're like, Dad, inflation. I'm like, you're 11 years old. You need to calm down. But we're trying to build that out. It's difficult, and you want to do it the right way and in a sustainable way, to where you're not getting out over your skis from a financial perspective. And then I think the other thing, we have started this illustrated kids book. My illustrator, Jason, I mentioned him earlier. He's amazing. He's so good. And so we've started working on a kids book together. And, a lot of our audience is the 38-year-old dad with 3 kids who wants their kids to be into golf. And so our thing is like, man, that's awesome. Also, we can provide you with something that engenders relationship with your kid, because that's more important than your kid being into golf. And I think that's a target that we really want to hit, and something that that we're working toward. So writing a kid's book's hard too. Everything's hard.
Lauren, you want to speak to
I
that?
know. I think writing a kid's book is harder than writing an adult book, because you have to
agree.
condense. You cannot waste words. It's challenging.
What was the hardest part of it for you?
The word count. I mean, and what's interesting is reaching a word count for my trade book was so hard, but then I don't know which was harder. But yeah, just making sure I wasn't using language, finding the line between language that was still pretty and poetic, but also that a little kid could hold on to and it made sense to them. I think that was the hardest part because how things sound when you read it is important to me. So finding that balance was the hardest part. So what
After you
about
try
for
it
you?
and then you go back and read Dr. Seuss, you're like, this guy was
Yeah,
a genius.
Right.
brilliant. Brilliant.
Because you
Yes.
read it and you're like, yeah, this is pretty good.
So
And then
simple.
you go try and write it and you're like, I have no idea how to do
Yep.
this.
Yep. Truly a gift.
So yeah, that's been difficult because I do want, like, one of my pet peeves with kids' books is when they either don't, not the whole thing necessarily, but I want part of it to, like you said, sound right and rhyme a little bit. And when it's just kind of all over the place, it's like, man, we're like, you're certainly not capturing me. I don't think you're capturing the kid either.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with that part of it. And I think what you said is right. It's the language that sounds lovely, but is also at a level to which kind of captures their imagination. That's a very difficult line to walk. And so I think that has been the hardest part.
On the merch front, something you could look into, there are a lot of sites that will basically give you a landing page that will even be under your domain that do all the printing on demand and ship it out as it goes. So you don't have to buy any kind of inventory, have it sitting at your house, and then fold it up in a box. And they just take more of the margin. But if you get into the t-shirt business and buy a bunch and ship them out thinking you will capture that margin, you'll learn very quickly, oh my gosh, someone that does this at a big level with a lot of shirts and a lot of group, they're worth an extra 15% because one, it's worth my time, and two, they know what they're doing and have the shipping labels and all the equipment you'd also have to buy. And so I know a lot of bands, especially bands that make their money mostly touring, aren't in a one location long enough to handle merch orders while they're on the road 250 days a year. And those websites never run out. You can place something, you never run out of designs, there's no sold out, and it just goes.
Are you able to ship them your, like, let's say I buy hats from over here, are you able to ship those to them and that's what they do with those?
You can do that too, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Probably
There's some good options out there.
Yeah, with all your work with bands, Coop. Yeah, it's always got to be on point for that.
Especially given the inflation from my kids.
You always hit the threshold where, you're going to need a local company to just take it all over for you, or you could do it yourself if you're small enough. There's always those different thresholds that it's not for everybody, but I've found a big chunk of the middle can be done by one of those sites, and it makes your life a lot easier.
For sure. It's great.
There you go. My little tidbit was somebody the other day I was reading, it might have been Tyler Staton. I actually don't know. Do you know, Lauren? Do you say Staton or Staton?
I think it's Staton, but I could be wrong. That's how I would pronounce it.
So
I thought it was
anyway,
Stanton. So
there you go.
That's what Matt has said. I was like, "There's no extra N in it. It's Staton, not Stanton."
Yeah, it can't be that. But I think it was in his latest book. But it's talking about the parable of the prodigal son is the greatest story ever told. Even of all Jesus' stories, it's like the one, and it's so simple, but so powerful. And there's so much going on in it. It just reminded me of the children's book conversation too. I didn't want to lose that. I've just thought about that a lot since then. Just there's so much there, and that's such a hard thing. Like y'all are saying, to get to that point is really a journey. So kudos to Lauren and to Kyle and to all those children's writers out there. So
yeah, there's a great Aaron Sorkin quote where he talks about how all story is just intent and then obstacle, intent and obstacle, intent and obstacle. And I think that's like what you see in the prodigal son story, right? Is like intent, obstacle, and then obviously the resolution is a picture of the gospel. But whenever you were talking about that, Ken, it just made me think about that, because I think sometimes you see all these people online or on Twitter or whatever, like, oh, here's the 27 formulas for telling a story, and it's like, I don't know, man. Like, maybe there are that many. I don't know if I can keep up with all that. Like, I need to keep it. One of the things I've learned is just like most of your solutions boil down to like keeping it simple. And I just forget that. It's like God's grace. I just forget it every day. And I forget to keep things simple every single day, and I need to be reminded of it. So yeah, that's a good word, Ken. Appreciate that.
Lauren, do you have something else here?
Well, I was just thinking when you talked about intent and obstacle, and going back to what you shared at the beginning, where you'd rather share about kind of the people that lost in a tournament versus the one that made it, because sure, there are obstacles to the guy that had the perfect game or whatever, but we definitely identify with the one that had to struggle through the obstacle, that it didn't turn out like they wanted, like they intended. And so I wonder if that's why those are better stories, or one that we connect with a little more deeply.
Yeah, totally. I think one of my through lines of my career has been writing about Rory McIlroy, who's been trying to win a major. He won his last major in 2014, and one of the biggest storyline arcs of since I started covering golf has been, when is he going to win another one? And there's been so many close calls, and so it's not just intent and obstacle in that specific tournament, but throughout throughout 5 years and now 10 years. That's all. You start looking at movies or TV shows and you're like, this is just intent and obstacle over and over again. And I think it's a very helpful way to think about storytelling.
Yeah, it reminds me of Tin Cup, going for the green, man, over and over.
I love Tin Cup. But I think that's what's going to make Rory or Spieth next victory is going to be insane, because of what the last 10 years have looked like for those two guys. Like people I would root for, I have nothing in this fight. I'd root for Jordan Spieth just because it's like he had it, he dropped something, and he's been trying to find it for a long time.
For sure.
Maybe that's the easiest, nicest way to put it. But but if he recaptured either one of those guys, or was able to win a big tournament, it was like Tiger's last one. You're jumping up and down because you never thought you'd see it again. So that's a lot. That's really fun. That's why sports is awesome.
Especially how old I am. It's like I'm not thinking about Rory. I think about Tiger, I'm 46. So, Rory's just a pup. Like Tiger was my guy, watching him play in that golf store in Waco. Still remember watching him.
He came to the golf store. He hit a hole in one in the golf store.
He was on that. My friends would have been amazing. He was only on TV in the golf store, a little CRT in the corner. I just remember watching him. I think I was there watching him at the U.S. Open the year, where the Tiger Slam. So it was, I think then, Kyle, you can correct, that have been the third leg of the Tiger Slam? Would have been the U.S. Open? It was something like that, the way that fell. But
was that the 2000 one?
Yeah, where he won 4 in a row, but just not in the calendar year.
That was the first one.
That kicked it off. Okay.
U.S. Open, British Open, PGA, and then the 2001 Masters.
So I remember watching the first one, then the U.S. Open there at the golf store.
The Pebble Beach one.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, just kind of funny that it's like, but I'm sure people that are in their 30s are probably asking the question for Rory, like, is he going to win another one? So
yeah, me and Rory, just a couple guys in our 30s. I turned 40 in like 3 weeks.
Yeah,
so that's a tough scene. It's because I've been giving my wife a hard time about being 40 for the last year. But
older woman.
Well, yeah, I've only got a couple weeks left to get that.
To do it.
Love it.
Well, thanks for doing this. What's the I'll put the Normal Sport link in our show notes and all that, but like, what's the best way for people to follow you, Kyle?
Yeah, normalsport.com is our newsletter, and then you can just search for me on Twitter. I'm not very active on Instagram, but Twitter is where I drop some just words and thoughts and stuff like that. So either of those places, and I appreciate you guys having me. I love to, this, Kent, but I love talking about this stuff. It's fun. I always learn something just from talking to people like you guys, and pick something up, and it's just, I don't know, it's very life-giving for me. So I appreciate the invite.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming on, Kyle.
Feelings mutual. It's been enjoyable. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode. You guys can rate and review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening. It always helps us get the word out. Speaking of sharing things, and we'll see you on the next episode of Make It, Share It.
be here, kid. You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't? What if you fly?